The Avengers movies were one of the most ambitious undertakings in film in years, a series of 5 superhero movies, many in different genres, leading up to a giant crossover that would be one of the biggest movie events in years. I don't think it's an understatement to say that the Avengers movies have been and continue to be wildly successful. The video games that went along with those movies, however, were a different story. Marvel hired Sega to publish the video games tying in with their movies, and out of the 5 games Sega made, 4 were utter shit. So Marvel fired Sega and hired a new publisher to create a movie tie-in for the Avengers. Unfortunately, they chose Ubisoft. The marketing for the Avengers revealed that the movie would be about the Avengers fighting an alien invasion, which was eventually revealed to be a new race called the Chitauri. The problem? Ubisoft had been making a game about the Skrulls, so their Avengers tie-in game was scrapped, and since there hasn't been an Iron Man 3 or Thor the Dark World game, I'm guessing Marvel fired Ubisoft too. However, Ubisoft wasn't about to let a perfectly good cash cow franchise go to waste, and instead of trashing their Avengers game, they did some retooling and released the game as The Avengers Battle for Earth. As soon as I saw the game, I noticed that it was made by Ubisoft, and I stood up and declared, "That game is going to suck!" And considering that the game is currently taking up space at my local library, I'm guessing my hunch was right. So let's see if Ubisoft turned things around and made a decent game, or if they cranked out another piece of shit. The game's story is taken from the comic book storyline Secret Invasion, where Earth is invaded by an army of Skrulls, aliens that can don the appearance and powers of Earth's superheroes. Of course, I use the term story very loosely with this game. All you're told at the start of the game is that aliens are attacking the Earth, the game has 5 locations with missions, and all you're told is that the aliens have sabotaged and attacked each of these locations and you need to go kill them. It's just so lazy that they didn't even try to thread a narrative through the game. There's no backstory, no build-up, no paranoia about the heroes not knowing who they can trust and who they can't. No, that Heavy is a spy! Just go here and kill Skrull ass. That's the Ubisoft I know, just enough story to keep you from realizing that there's no story. The game even manages to screw up the tiny threads of story that it does have. The game has 5 locations, and you have 2 brief cutscenes at each location explaining what you're doing. 1 cutscene at the start, 1 in the middle, but none at the end. The Skrulls have set up a black hole to suck the Baxter Building into the negative zone. Does the Baxter Building survive? Never explained. The villains attack the Peak, an orbital space station that protects the planet from alien invasion. What happens to the Peak? Never explained. What happens to the group of heroes and group of Skrulls that encounter at the Savage Land? Never explained. There's so little story that it's impossible to find the game compelling in the first place, and the game doesn't even wrap up the minuscule plot threads that it does have. They did not give a shit! Also, if I may geek out on you for a minute, Iron Man's default costume is wrong. He's wearing the Bleeding Edge armor, which wasn't introduced until 2 years after Secret Invasion was published. I've also managed to gather evidence supporting my theory that this is, in fact, the tie-in game to the Avengers movie given a complete overhaul. Exhibit A, all of the game's cutscenes are panels pulled from the comics, meaning they were either extremely lazy, which wouldn't surprise me, or they had to be thrown together at the last second. Exhibit B, Loki is a playable character, even though, according to my research, Loki had nothing to do with the Secret Invasion story. He had a brief appearance at the very end, and when he did, he was in his female form. Yeah, Loki is bisexual and can change his gender in the comics. Any bets on whether that makes it into the 3rd Thor movie? Exhibit C, Loki fights almost exclusively using a giant staff, probably originally his spear from the movie given a quick makeover. Exhibit D, all of the characters from the movie have their designs from the movie as unlockable costumes, in a game where the only character with more than 2 alternate suits is Captain America. The character models for these characters look drastically different from the game's normal art design. They're not just palette swaps, and that's not the kind of effort Ubisoft would put into the game unless they had these costumes already been made. Exhibit E, tell me if Hulk's Ultra move looks familiar to you. But enough about the story, let's talk about the gameplay. Battle for Earth is a fighting game, and honestly, it's a freaking weird one. You can play using either the Wii Remote or the gamepad, and I used the gamepad, even though it made recording a pain in the ass. This is what displays on the TV when you're using the gamepad, unless you use a Wii Remote to turn on a camera. And when you don't turn on the camera, you can't see the player's health bars, so the entire game is meant to be played from the gamepad. The entire game is played using the touchscreen. You tap this icon to fire a projectile at your opponent, which doesn't do crap. You tap this icon to run up to your opponent and do a kick, which doesn't do crap unless the kick is fully charged. And you tap these 3 icons at the bottom of the screen to use special attacks. So kick, throw crap, and special attack are the only 3 things that you can do in a fight. You also can't move. All you can do is slide to the left or slide to the right. While you fight, you build up a power bar. If it fills up once, you get a breaker move, which lets you immediately stop whatever your opponent is doing. If it fills up twice, you get an ultra move, which can't be countered, but deals much less damage than just a regular attack. Now, I don't mind a simple combat system. Pointlessly overcomplicated control schemes are the major thing that turns me off the mainstream fighting games these days, but the combat in Battle for Earth is so simple that the game becomes monotonous really quickly. Each side has two characters and one fights at a time. What confused me is that you have to get 2 KOs to win a match, but after you get 1 KO, both characters on both sides jump back to full health. There's no real reason for each player to have 2 fighters. You don't have to KO both enemies to win. There aren't any tag team attacks. Well, there are, but they just act as regular attacks without bonuses. The only thing having 2 fighters contributes to the game is that one player can heal while they're tagged out. And also it'll remind you of a much better game, Marvel vs. Capcom 3. The game has a roster of 20 characters, and to my utter surprise, all 20 characters are Avengers characters! The reason why I'm surprised is that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Smash Up shipped with 13 Ninja Turtles characters and 3 Rabbids from Ubisoft's own Rayman games. So what, no Sam Fisher or Altair in your Avengers fighting game? You're not going to put in Rabbids dressed like Iron Man and Black Widow to shamelessly pad out the roster? Is it possible that fanboy bitching actually got something accomplished and clued you in that you shouldn't shit on your customers like that? Or did you float the idea past Marvel and they told you to screw off? Sorry, I'm still a little bit bitter. The characters have different stats, but you'll notice very little difference in how each character controls. The primary differences between characters are their special attacks, and since special attacks are divided into categories, there's not a whole lot of variation to be found there either. Every damn character in the game plays exactly the same way. Their special attacks just do slightly different things. There are several special attacks in the game. Vertical attacks, shield attacks, jumping attacks, charging attacks. The game tries to incorporate a sort of rock, paper, scissors system where some special attacks can be used to counter others, but the problem is that special attacks need time to recharge, and the odds are that when you need to use a special attack to counter a different one, the move that you need will be still recharging and you can't use it. But here's the big problem with the special attacks. Jumping special attacks render your character immune to anything but vertical attacks. Shield attacks render your character immune to anything but jumping attacks. This means that characters with both shield and jumping attacks are pretty much broken. Characters like Spider-Man, Phoenix, and Magneto are completely overpowered because they have 2 different special attacks that they can use to make themselves temporarily invulnerable. They can abuse these special attacks and pretty much curb stomp whoever they fight because half the time you won't be able to land a hit. Granted, you can get around these special attacks, but you can only do it if A, you have a breaker ready, or B, your character has the correct special attack to counter it, you know that you have the correct special attack, which is another matter entirely, and you have the instinct and reflexes to use the attack before you get nailed. This pendulum swings the other way too. These unbalanced special attacks also mean that some of the characters are vastly inferior to others because they only have head-on direct attacks, so all they can do is charge at the enemy head-on with an attack that is easy to counter. I'm looking at you, Venom, you useless sack of crap! Each character has at least one attack that's designed to immobilize an enemy for a few seconds so that you can string together special attacks and perform combos. Only trouble is, special attacks are so strong that if someone lands a stunning attack on you and starts up a combo, you can kiss about half your health bar goodbye instantly! The only way to interrupt combos is by using a breaker move, so if you don't have a breaker charged up, you're screwed! The game quickly gets to the point where every single fight feels the same because you do the same damn thing in every fight. Just tap the icon for whatever special attack is full and then tap the next one. I just keep tapping the icons and after about a minute the fight is over. This is about the least involving combat system that I've ever played. The story campaign has fights ranked 1 to 5 stars in difficulty and the AI barely even fights back until you get to 4 stars and doesn't feel like it's even actively trying to win until you get to 5 stars, the highest difficulty. And the game's broken combat system is really spotlighted by the AI on 5 stars because the AI will constantly trap you in combos to stun lock you, and if, God help you, the AI is using Spider-Man, Magneto, or Phoenix or one of those other broken characters, the AI will spam the attacks that make them invulnerable. So depending on the difficulty, the AI is either too dumb to live or completely cheap and broken. The game has a ranking system where the more XP you earn in fights, the higher your superhero rank goes, but the XP system is just whacked out. You get XP at the end of a fight for basic attacks, special attacks, and defense, meaning how many attacks you dodge or counter. The game awards XP based solely on how many of each attack you use. This means that you get more XP in a fight where you lose a round than you get in a fight where you sweep your opponent, because if you lose one of the 3 rounds, the battle goes on longer and you have time to launch more attacks, which is the only thing that goes into calculating XP. The game also doesn't give you more XP for higher difficulty fights, which is backwards from every other fighting game that's ever been made. And the killer part is that gaining XP does absolutely nothing for you as far as gameplay goes. Getting to the highest ranks unlocks a few alternate costumes, but the alternate costumes are just lazy palette swaps of the character's already existing costume. So unless you really want to play as Doctor Doom wearing a black cloak instead of Doctor Doom wearing a green cloak, there is absolutely no reason to keep playing the game for XPs. And by the way, the majority of the alternate costumes in this game have to be purchased as DLC. There's only a handful of costumes that you unlock just by playing the game. This practice of DLC costumes just pisses me off because alternate costumes used to be included in games. You had like 9 or 10 costumes to unlock in Spider-Man on the Nintendo 64, but now the alternate costumes are taken out and you have to buy them separately. Because you already paid $50 for this game, which I didn't, but that's not the point, but Ubisoft wants to milk you for more money by cutting out content that used to just be included in the game and selling it separately. They're ripping you off! The game isn't going to last you very long either. The story campaign is short, 3, maybe 4 hours tops. The game has challenges that don't take long at all to blow through. There are character trials that are so simple, monotonous, and long that you won't do any of them, and the unlockables are lame and not much motivation to keep going, and the combat isn't nearly fun enough for you to keep playing just because you want to. All that's left is online multiplayer, which I didn't have time to try, but I'm guessing it's barren these days, and since the game's roster is so unbalanced, I'm guessing the online was lousy anyway, because online players, shitheads that they are, will abuse any exploit they can find. So on top of sucking on toast, the game isn't very substantial at all. Speaking of the character challenges, they're glitched bad because I started doing the ones with Iron Man and the game wouldn't acknowledge that I was dodging the enemy's attacks when the goal of the challenge is to dodge the enemy's attacks! Either that or the instructions avoid the Jericho missiles mean something other than avoid the Jericho missiles. Avengers Battle for Earth is lousy. It's just another damn zero-effort licensed game. It's short, it's poorly designed, there's not much content, the AI is lousy, the story is almost non-existent. I'll admit that the simple combat is an interesting attempt at making something different in regards to fighting games, but it's monotonous and unstimulating at best and broken and frustrating at worst. In other words, it sucks.